Real children only. At my mother's funeral, my sister Rebecca announced this is for real children only and blocked me from the will reading. Everyone nodded. I turned to leave. Then the estate lawyer stood up, his hands shaking as he opened the sealed envelope. Actually, he said slowly, the entire $4.2 million estate is designated to. My sister's face drained of color. My name is Kira Dalton, and I was 8 years old when my mother married into the Preston family. I was 36 when she died, and I spent every year in between trying to earn a place at a table that was never set for me. The funeral home smelled of lilies and furniture polish. White roses covered my mother's casket, each arrangement more elaborate than the last. Rebecca had spared no expense, making sure everyone knew the Prestons honored their dead with appropriate grandeur. I sat in the third row, not the first. That was reserved for real family. My mother, Catherine Preston, had been 59. A brain aneurysm took her while she was reading in her garden, quick and painless according to the doctors. I'd gotten the call from Rebecca's husband, not Rebecca herself. Your mother passed this morning. Funeral is Saturday at 11. I'll text you the details. Then he'd hung up before I could respond. I'd driven 6 hours from Baltimore to their Connecticut estate, the same house I'd grown up in but never belonged to. The same house where Rebecca made sure I understood, daily, that I was the outsider. The daughter from Catherine's first marriage. The reminder of a life before Preston wealth and status. Now the service was over. People filed out, offering condolences to Rebecca and her younger brother Marcus, who stood at the front accepting sympathy with practiced grace. I stayed in my seat, waiting. Several people glanced at me with that particular look, the one that said they weren't quite sure who I was or why I was there. Mrs. Ashworth, my mother's former tennis partner, stopped briefly. I'm so sorry for your loss, dear. She patted my hand. Catherine spoke of you sometimes. Sometimes. The word hit like a slap, but I smiled. Thank you. When the room finally emptied except for family and the lawyer, Rebecca turned to me. She wore black Chanel, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. At 42, she looked exactly like her father had, sharp features and calculating eyes. The will reading is family only, she said, her voice carrying across the empty pews. I stood slowly. I am family. Real family, she corrected. Blood. You know what I mean. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside her but said nothing. He never did. Years of watching Rebecca operate had taught him silence was safer than opposition. Catherine was my mother, I said quietly. Catherine was married to our father, Rebecca replied. You were part of the package deal, but let's not pretend you're actually a Preston. This is for legitimate heirs. Around us, aunts and uncles, cousins I barely knew, all nodded. Some looked away, embarrassed but compliant. No one spoke up. No one ever did. The lawyer, a thin man in his 60s named Howard Brennan, stood near the front with a leather portfolio clutched to his chest. His face had gone pale, eyes darting between Rebecca and me. Ms. Preston, he started, perhaps we should. We should proceed with immediate family only, Rebecca cut him off. She looked at me. I'm sure you understand, Kira. This is painful enough without making it more complicated. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, the old anger that came from a lifetime of being erased. But I was tired. So incredibly tired of fighting for space in a family that had spent 28 years making it clear I didn't belong. Fine, I said. I picked up my purse and started toward the side exit. That's when Howard Brennan moved. He stepped into the aisle, blocking Rebecca's path to the conference room where the will reading was scheduled. His hands were shaking. I could see that from where I stood. Actually, he said, his voice thin but steady, I need to clarify something before anyone leaves. Rebecca frowned. Howard, we've known each other for 15 years. Let's not make this difficult. Your mother's will, he continued, ignoring her, contains specific instructions about who must be present for the reading. And those instructions are legally binding. Of course, Rebecca said smoothly. That's why we're gathering the family. Howard opened his portfolio with trembling fingers. He pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with red wax. I recognized my mother's handwriting across the front. To be opened only in the presence of all named beneficiaries. Ms. Kira Dalton must be present, Howard said. She is the primary beneficiary. The room went silent. Not the respectful silence of a funeral, but the shocked silence of a bomb detonating. Rebecca's face shifted through several expressions before settling on controlled fury. That's impossible. It's your mother's will, Howard replied. Filed and notarized 6 months ago. 6 months. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse. She never said anything. I stood frozen near the exit, my hand still on the door handle. Primary beneficiary. The words didn't make sense. My mother and I had been cordial at best. Distant. I called her every week, visited once a month. But our conversations were surface level. We talked about weather and work, never feelings, never the past, never the unspoken hurt that lived between us. There must be a mistake, Rebecca said, but her voice had lost its edge. Now it just sounded desperate. There's no mistake. Howard looked at me. Ms. Dalton, would you please join us? I walked back down the aisle on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Rebecca's eyes followed me with pure venom. Marcus looked stunned. The aunts and uncles whispered urgently to each other. We moved to the conference room, a space I remembered from childhood. Dark wood paneling, a long table, high-backed chairs. Rebecca's father, William Preston, had conducted business here. I'd only been inside twice, both times to be lectured about disappointing the family. Everyone took seats. Rebecca positioned herself at the head of the table, a power play that would have worked if Howard hadn't gently directed her to the side. He sat at the head himself, placing the envelope in front of him. Before I read the will, Howard said, I want to explain the circumstances of its creation. Catherine came to my office in January. She was alone, and she was very clear about her intentions. This document supersedes all previous versions. Did our father know? Rebecca demanded. Your father passed away 7 years ago, Howard said carefully. This is Catherine's will, not his. She had every right to distribute her assets as she saw fit. He broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper seemed impossibly loud. Then he unfolded several pages and began to read. I, Catherine Elizabeth Preston, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. His voice was steady now, falling into the professional rhythm of legal language. To my daughter Rebecca and Preston, I leave the sum of $50,000 and my jewelry collection, excluding the diamond pendant, which has other designation. Rebecca's face went white. 50,000. The estate is worth over $4 million. Howard continued reading. To my son Marcus William Preston, I leave the sum of $50,000 and the art collection from the main house. Marcus leaned forward, hands pressed flat on the table. Mom, what? He stopped, realizing she wasn't there to answer. To my former sisters-in-law, nieces, and nephews, Howard read. I leave individual bequests as listed in Appendix A, totaling $200,000. Rebecca stood up. This is insane. She wouldn't. Please sit down, Ms. Preston, Howard said firmly. I'm not finished. She sat, but her hands were clenched into fists. The remainder of my estate, Howard continued, including the Connecticut property, all financial accounts, stocks, bonds, and liquid assets totaling approximately $4.2 million, I leave entirely to my daughter, Kira Elizabeth Dalton. The room erupted. Rebecca's voice rose above the chaos. She's not her daughter. Not really. This is fraud. Rebecca, Marcus tried to calm her. No. She whirled on me. You manipulated her. You poisoned her mind against her real children. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. $4.2 million. The house. Everything. My mother had left me everything. Howard raised his voice. There's more. Catherine included a letter to be read aloud. Ms. Dalton, would you prefer I read it privately? I found my voice. No. Read it here. He pulled out a separate sheet, my mother's handwriting filling the page. His voice softened as he read her words. To my family, I know this will come as a shock, particularly to Rebecca and Marcus. You are my children, and I loved you both. But I have watched for 28 years as you treated Kira as less than family. As an outsider. As someone to be tolerated but never truly accepted. Rebecca made a choking sound. I tried to bridge that gap, Howard read. I tried to make you see her as your sister. But I was weak. I chose peace over justice. I chose my marriage and my social standing over defending my first daughter. I watched her be excluded from holidays, forgotten on birthdays, dismissed at every family gathering, and I said nothing. That is my greatest shame. The words landed like stones. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Kira, Howard continued, reading my mother's words, you deserved better. You deserved a mother who fought for you. I can't give you those years back, but I can give you security. Freedom. A life where you never have to beg for acceptance from people who should have given it freely. The money, the house, All of it. It's not payment. It's acknowledgement. You are my daughter. You always were. I'm sorry it took until now to say it clearly enough that no one could deny it. The letter ended. Howard folded it carefully and slid it across the table to me. Rebecca was crying now, not sad tears but angry ones. She was sick. This isn't legal. We'll contest it. You can try, Howard said. But I had Catherine evaluated by 2 independent physicians before she signed. She was completely competent. And the will is ironclad. I made sure of it. Marcus put his head in his hands. Why didn't she just talk to us? She did, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. She talked to you every time you excluded me from Christmas. Every time you forgot my birthday. Every time you made sure I knew I wasn't really part of this family. My voice stayed level despite the emotion churning inside me. She asked you, over and over in small ways, to include me. You never listened. That's not fair, Rebecca said, but her voice had lost its conviction. What's not fair, I replied, is being 8 years old and hearing your stepsister tell everyone at school that you're not really family. What's not fair is spending every holiday in a separate room because your presence makes everyone uncomfortable. What's not fair is watching your mother choose silence because speaking up would cost her too much. I stood, legs steadier now. I'm not going to apologize for what she decided. And I'm not going to fight about it. The will is legal. It's final. And it's what she wanted. Howard handed me a folder. These are the account details, property deeds, and contact information for the financial advisors. We should schedule a meeting next week to discuss the transfer process. I took the folder. It felt heavy. Real. Rebecca watched me with eyes full of hatred. You're going to take everything? The house we grew up in. You grew up in it, I corrected. I just lived there. I walked out of the conference room, through the funeral home, into the bright afternoon sunlight. My car was parked under an oak tree, the same tree I'd climbed as a kid when I needed to escape. I sat behind the wheel and finally let myself cry. Not because I'd inherited money. Not even because of the vindication. But because my mother, in death, had finally said the words she couldn't say in life. You are my daughter. You always were. 3 weeks later, I stood in the garden where my mother had died. The house was mine now, though I hadn't decided yet what to do with it. Sell it, probably. Too many ghosts lived in these rooms. But the garden, I liked the garden. My mother had planted roses here, dozens of them, in every color. This was where she'd been happiest, away from the performance of Preston life. I'd had the diamond pendant appraised. It was worth $30,000, an antique piece from my grandmother, my real grandmother on my mother's side. She'd worn it in every photo I had of her. Now it sat in a safety deposit box, the only inheritance I actually wanted. Rebecca had filed to contest the will, as expected. Her lawyer had called mine, making threats and accusations. But Howard was right. The will was ironclad. The case would go nowhere. Marcus had reached out. A short email, not apologizing exactly, but acknowledging. I should have been a better brother. I'm sorry I wasn't. I hadn't responded yet. Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. The choice was mine now. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend asking if I wanted to get dinner. Normal life, continuing despite everything. I typed back yes, then looked at the roses one more time. Thank you. I whispered to the garden, to my mother, to the past I could finally leave behind. Then I locked the gate and drove away, toward a future where I didn't have to earn my place anymore. Because my mother had given me something more valuable than $4 million. She'd given me proof that I'd always belonged, even when everyone else tried to convince me otherwise. And that was worth everything.